Hello everybody and welcome to Textures for Photoshop.com tutorials channel, the place where you learn how to use textures in Photoshop to create interesting effects. Are you ready for a new quick and easy tutorial? Today I'm going to show you how to create a falling snow effect in Photoshop. To do this, we will start using this image and then we will add a few textures that you can download from texturesforphotoshop.com. And you can find the links for these textures in the description below. So let's start. First of all, we have this image that is taken on a bright, clear day, so there's no snow in it. And to add the snow, first we will need to create a bit the illusion of depth. And to do this, I simply duplicate this layer and then apply a Gaussian blur to it. By going to Filter, Blur, and Gaussian Blur, and 2 pixels radius for the Gaussian blur is enough. And also I only want this applied on the parts that are furthest away from the camera, so to do this I'll add a layer mask and choosing a brush with a soft edge and choosing black as a color, I will paint on the layer mask like this, just on the sides and on the corners and on the parts that are closest to the camera, just like this. Doesn't have to be perfect because it's only a layer mask, and also it helps if you increase the opacity of the brush and you build up this effect. And I will show you what I got earlier because I already did this. So I have this layer, and as you can see in the middle of the screen there's a bit of a blur, and the mask looks like this. If I'm clicking Alt and click on the layer mask thumbnail, this is how my mask looks like. So only the white areas will be blurred, the black areas will not be blurred. So Alt and click on the layer mask again to go back. Alright, so now what I want to do is to add a bit of a fog effect or a mist, because this will be a winter scene. And to do this I will add a levels adjustment layer. To do this I go here and choose levels, and this will brighten up a bit the image. If you use these settings, just grab the dark tones marker and pull it up a bit in the output levels, and you can see what this does. So it takes the dark tones and makes them lighter. Again, this layer has a layer mask, and the layer mask looks like this because I only want it to affect the middle of the screen and not the corners and the sides. Alt click on the layer mask again and go back. Another thing that I want to do is to decrease the saturation in the center of the screen, and for this I added a hue and saturation adjustment layer, and the settings are here. So as you can see, this affects the saturation, so I'll just lower it a bit. Again, this has a the layer mask that looks like this. And the next step that we're going to do is add another adjustment layer, which is a gradient map. And the way a gradient map works is that it replaces the dark tones and the highlight tones with the colors of your choice. So if I double click on this and click on the gradient, you see that I selected the gradient map that starts with a gray, with a neutral gray, and goes up to white. So what this will do is all the dark tones will be replaced with this gray, and all the highlights will be replaced with white. And again, I have a layer mask because I only want this in the center, not on the sides or the corners. I duplicated this layer, and for the mask I only applied it to the top part of the screen with the same settings. And what this does is increase the lightness of the top part of the screen, because this is where the light comes in. And in this winter scene we have some mist, and if the mist is lighted from above, then this will give a glow to the scene, which makes it look more realistic. Another thing that we can do is add a new layer by clicking Ctrl Alt Shift and N. And in this new layer we can paint using a soft brush. Let's increase the opacity to 100, and let's choose white as a color. And what we can do is just paint a few details here, something that would look like snow. Let's choose a bit of grayish color, and yeah, we can play around with it. It doesn't have to be perfect again, because we will add some snowflakes over it and some more mist, and it will not be so visible. So just to give it a bit more depth, I will choose again a white color and decrease the brush size to something like 6, and just paint in some highlights here and there, and like this. This is just something very quickly added. You can play around with it. And if you look here, I prepared this before, so it can look something like this. Next, we'll start adding the textures. So we have here the snow texture that we downloaded from textures from Photoshop. And what we'll need to do first is change the blending mode from normal to screen. And this will blend the image with the background. And what we need to do is to use the Edit, Transform and Distort tool, and just grab the corners and try to align the image a bit. Something like this. And something like this. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect, because we'll also use a layer mask, and we'll only display it on certain parts, not on the entire screen. And then hit enter, and we will add the layer mask. Click Ctrl I to make the layer mask black, and this will hide the texture totally. So now we need to make it show, but by choosing a brush. Let's make it a larger brush, and we'll choose the opacity at around 50 and also lower the flow a bit. And while in the mask, we choose a white and then start painting here and there on the road. It doesn't have to be perfect, because again, we are in the layer mask, and we can go back if you want to. And also, because we have the opacity and the flow lowered, the more passes you make over the image with the brush, the more visible it will become. And something like this, and like this. And also I prepared this before, and I ended up with something like this. And you can see the layer mask looks like this. I then duplicated this layer just to add an extra level of detail. It's not much, but it makes a difference. Then we have our next texture, which is the falling snow texture, the one with the snowflakes. And this in normal mode looks like this, but if we change the blending mode to screen, then it blends beautifully with this background. And because this is not visible enough, I just added a new levels layer by going to the adjustment levels, and I chose to decrease a bit the white point level, and you can see what this does. The lower I go, the more bright this becomes. So somewhere around 128 is enough. Also important to note is that you have to click this icon, because this will clip only to the underlying layer. If this is not on, then the entire image is affected and we get this, which we don't want. So make sure this is clicked. Then we have the other falling snow texture, which looks like this. And I duplicated this again. Again, this is with the screen blending mode. And I duplicated this layer and just moved it a bit to the right, because this creates this illusion that there are multiple levels and multiple layers for this snow, and you get the more realistic depth feeling. I also added a levels layer for this to make it a bit brighter. You can see the difference. Again, I used the same technique to take this white marker down a bit, and again with clipping the results to the underlying layer. The last texture that I added was the dust cloud texture, and as you can see, I'm also using the screen blending mode. You can of course hit Ctrl T and drag the corners around to rotate it, or maybe move it like this to have a smaller size. And as you can notice, it is a bit too yellow for this scene, so I added a new adjustment layer by going to the adjustment layers and hue and saturation, and I decreased the saturation by taking the saturation slider down, also clipping the results only to the layer below. And finally I added another adjustment layer, this time for the entire image, a curves adjustment layer. And the curves adjustment layer just increases the contrast in the scene, makes it look more dramatic. So the way I did this is I just put in 2 points in the curves, and one for the dark tones, and I just pulled down a bit, and one for the light tones and also pulled it down a bit. You can see this increases the contrast in the picture. This depends of course on the image that you're using, so for you it might be a bit different if you're using a different image, but this is the general technique to increase the contrast. So this is the final result. Let's take a look again at the starting image, and let's see how the final result looks like. And again the starting image and the final result. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. You can download the textures used in this tutorial from texturesforphotoshop.com. You can download them for free without registration. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and see you soon.